Shut up, compressor. Hey everyone, I'm Matt with Doogs Models, and this is the Flankoff. Well, I can't believe that the Flankoff has run out into 20 installments so far, but here we are. And this time out, we're going to be talking about the decals. Now, this is probably going to be a pretty short installment because I've already done them all. But I wanted to walk through briefly just kind of the scale of effort involved with the Su-35 in general and the Great Wall kit in particular and all the decals and stencils and shit like that. And I also wanted to touch on some of the fun of laying these down and finding a solvent that plays well with them. So first off, let's talk about the scale of the thing. Now, the Great Wall kit provides you with these gigantic, really nice color, I'm not sure, 11 by 14 maybe? Anyway, they're big ass painting and main decal guides. So this is where you'll find stuff for, you know, where the port numbers go, where the stars go, that kind of thing. In addition to that, you get another sheet the same size, front and back, for all of the stencils. There are a lot of them. Here you get the sides, sort of the inside tails, the inside intakes, all that good stuff. And that's not all. Also got all the shit here for the pylons and the ordnance. So, all told, there are a lot of decals to navigate in this kit. And I actually find it funny, I got through the aircraft itself in 2 nights. So the first night was all the underside stuff and stencils and kind of extending up to the sides, the intakes and things like that. Next night was all the upper surfaces, and then I had to finish up like 3 stencils after that. The missiles and the pylons, though, took probably like 4 solid nights of effort just to make those happen. Now, granted, I was also cutting some videos at the time, so, you know, not a full bench evening, but the thing with the missiles is, you know, you have all these little stencils, and you do one side, and shit, you can't hold this with anything because the other stencils are setting up and you don't want to touch decal solvent while it's doing its thing, and you want gravity to work as much as possible in your favor, so you do one side and you have to let it sit. And if you don't get all of that side done because you look and you realize, oh shit, it's like 1:30 in the morning, then you have to do that side and wait again. And so a lot of this was just, it took time. So all of that's basically just a long way of saying that, yeah, there are a fuck ton of decals to deal with this kit. Now, I want to talk about the quality of the decals and the handling characteristics and all that, but before I do, I'm going to go ahead and swap the camera around so we can actually look at the flanker itself and the missiles and all that stuff, and we can talk about the quality and handling and whatnot looking at it instead of looking at me. Okay, so here is the Su-35 with all of the decals on it. The stars, the numbers, the stencils, all that business. Up under here, more stencils. On the wings, more stencils. Now, overall, the Great Wall decals went on quite well. Just a couple seconds in warm water, and they slid free of the backing paper very easily. Nice and workable. I had no issues with any of them folding in on each other or tearing or any of that business. And they also tended to, as you can see, if we get in close here on the star, they suck down very nicely into the surface detail. You know, this one has those rivet lines and the panel lines nicely represented. You know, if you look at, where is it? You know, like the positional light, the black thing. I'm not sure if it's going to show up on the camera, but in person, that thing is sucked in wonderfully around the surface detail. So generally, they sucked in wonderfully. However, a lot of the stencils, you know, let's see if we can zoom in instead of me having to hold it closer to the camera. So a lot of the stencils, like, you know, right in here you can see it, and especially on a lot of these little hoist point stencils, you can see the carrier film. And that is either a sheen difference between the decals and the paint, and it'll completely vanish with a clear coat, or it's more Tamiya style where it's just thick as shit carrier film that is going to stand proud even once a clear coat is applied, in which case we'll have to think of some other ways around that. I'm really hopeful at this point that, you know, given how nicely these things have sucked in and this thing is sucked in and all that, that these stencils are the same. It's just because they have so much clear carrier film in them, you can see them showing up with that sheen difference a lot. But we will have to see once the clear goes down. In terms of ordnance and pylons and things like that, it's a very similar story to the actual fuselage itself. Here is one of the wingtip pylons. As you can see, as we get in here, if it'll ever focus, you know, the positioning light decals sucked in wonderfully. These things look like they have sucked in wonderfully, but they also don't, because there is a definite sheen difference between the decal itself and the paint. And so it's one of those things where I really want to trust it. I really want to put a clear coat down, but at the same time, I'm kind of terrified too, because if that's not just a sheen difference, if it's something else going on, then that's going to fuck me pretty bad. So at some point here, I'm going to have to roll the dice. Now, I don't want to bore you with all the various missiles and pylons and shit. You know, they are what they are. You see one R-73, you kind of see them all. But for the most part, the stencils look the part. The R-77s and their pylons especially have a lot of colorful shit happening. Frustratingly, the carrier film extends over the these little recessed mounting bracket areas, so there's a need to trim that off once the decal sets, because it's just one of those gaps that no matter what you do, it's not going to suck in there. And then you've got the R-27s, so the ER right here, with all the fun shit going on up by the radome. Now, I will note on the R-27s, there are a bunch of other little stencils in here that I just elected not to do. Mainly because it looks like they're supposed to line up on these holes, and the decals don't. Also because, Now, continuing on with the R-27 ET, same story. And then last, and quite possibly least, we've got the Kitty Hawk KAB 1500Ls, which, as you can see here, do have the stencil decals around the bomb body. These are Kitty Hawk's own decals. I found these thin and relatively trouble-free, but they had a hesitancy to really suck in kind of no matter what I put on them. Now, these are going to be weathered to shit, so I'm not too concerned about that. As you can see on this Cyrillic stencil here, the carrier film does not seem to be as thick as it is on the Great Wall kit, but again, we could be dealing with just different decal characteristics. Finally, let's touch on chemistry. Now, several years ago, I was at a panel at CES, and one of the panelists was talking about this concept of science versus magic. Science being something that is understandable and repeatable. You do a thing, you do it again, it's predictable, you know what's going to happen. Magic is something where you don't know. You do something once and it comes out one way, you do something the same way again and it comes out a completely different way. And he was using these to describe Microsoft Excel, which is science. You know, you do something and you know what it does, there are formulas, things like that. And then Microsoft Word, which is magic. You know, you insert a picture and all of a sudden your document is completely reformatted and you don't know where anything is. And you don't know why. But the next time you put a picture in, everything is nice and happy. So I kind of view decals as magic in the sense of one kit to another, one manufacturer to another. You're never quite sure what you're going to get. And I put a lot of that on probably different chemical variations in the decals themselves and how they're formulated, what makes up the carrier film, what makes up the adhesive, how thick the carrier film is applied. All that stuff goes into it. And so you can have cartograph printed decals from, say, Furball that are fantastic and super thin but also perform well, and you know, you can move them around, they don't tear. And then you can have cartograph printed decals with your Italeri F104 and they feel like moving around slabs of leather on your kit. And granted, they do eventually work out for the best, but the performance characteristics are completely different. And where I've really noticed that with all decals is in which solvents they respond to. So, you know, the good old standby here of microsol, these kind of sort of reacted, but not really. For some reason, they just lapped off Solvaset, but I think my bottle might be, I don't know, it has not ever been the nuclear option that others claim it is for anything I've ever tried it on. It basically seems kind of like microsol. But I'm open to the idea that maybe my bottle turned, you know, with age. I mean, you can see that it's had, it is by no means a young whippersnapper. This AK decal adapter seems to work differently from anything else. It worked really well on those Italeri F104 decals back when I was playing with those. But there are some decals that works amazingly with, and there are others that you may as well just spit on them. I mean, so it's one of those, find a decal, put it on something, test it, and that's kind of where we get to. This Tamiya Mark Fit stuff didn't do anything. Mark Setter is a setting solution, so instead of the microsol, it's more like microset, except it isn't prone to surface tension issues like microset is on top of Mr. Paint. So this is basically what I would put down before putting the decals down, and it did its job just fine. Now this guy, Mr. Mark Softer, I have had this melt decals, destroy decals, and actually go to damage the paint underneath, or I think it might have been damaging the Stynylrez primer underneath the paint and just making everything shift. But with these decals, it seemed to do a pretty good job. I mean, this is what is responsible for the stars sucking in as well as they did. Now, where that was not working, which is a couple of stencils, and again, it may be the sheen difference and whatnot, X20A is another option, because, hey, why not? It won't actually damage the paint, the Mr. Paint, but if you scrub it hard enough, it will sure as hell destroy the decal. So if you stop just short of destroying the decal, if you just brush some of this on and let it do its thing, it can actually attack the decal just enough to really let it melt into the surface. The last option is my Guns Mr. Leveling Thinner, which strangely didn't seem to do all that much with these decals. It helped out in a couple places, but honestly it seemed to be more prone to doing harm to some of the surrounding paint if I got a little bit careless than it did to actually helping suck them down. Prime example of that is up here on the tail with this Bort number. And as you can see, the get these out of the way so it'll focus on something for a change. And if you look right up there, just to the side of the 4, you can see where it actually decided to take a little chop out of some paint. But the carrier film is still showing up, and from here it looks like a thick Tamiya decal, which is really maddening, but again, that may be a sheen difference, and I hope to God that it is. So that's pretty much where things stand with the decals and the current state of the Su-35. Now it's time to go ahead and give this thing a clear coat or two to seal the decals in, hopefully blend them in visually with a uniform sheen across most of the aircraft. I'm going to try to avoid some of the metallic areas, or have a light hand on them if nothing else. And then, provided that there are no hiccups and that what I'm seeing here is sheen difference as opposed to, you know, thick ass carrier film that has to be sanded down to be blended in, assuming that's all the case, the next installment of the Flankoff will be getting into weathering and all the little shit that we have to deal with still, like landing gear. So thanks for watching. You know, like the channel, leave a comment, all that good stuff, and I will be back with part 21 hopefully before too long.